guest today is an expert in the practice of self-awareness, self-acceptance, and creating high-achieving leaders and teams. She's a people and leadership expert and helps business leaders with a desire for positive change create new levels of impact and fulfillment in their work. Please welcome coach and keynote speaker from Phoenix, Arizona, Christina Howard. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
I think your topic is going to be a really fascinating one because I think that we as business owners kind of all struggle with self awareness, self acceptance, bettering ourselves. So I'm excited to dive right into this with you today. So tell us, first of all, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing business leaders today?
Well, I know we talk about it all the time. Right now, it's hard to find good talent and keep good talent. And I have a different spin on why this is challenging these days. I think that the professional world and the personal world are blending quite a bit. And team members are coming into the workplace expecting to be, cared about in a different way than maybe we have in the past. And so being able to cultivate empathy in the workplace is very critical and probably a big challenge for people. There's been so many changes over the last several years with COVID and just changing, economic, political environments that people have a little bit of change fatigue. And when we have change fatigue, it's hard to be really empathetic with ourselves. And so leaders have to learn how to be empathetic with themselves and understand that they might be grieving or going through something and learn to take care of themselves so that they can then hold space for other team members and retain the kind of people that they actually want to be able to retain.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I completely agree with you that we all have COVID fatigue. Like, a lot of us are just exhausted. There are so
Yeah.
many people that lost loved ones throughout this process. Just trying to keep our businesses afloat during this unprecedented time
Yeah.
really can wear on you. And I think it's so important that you said that we as leaders need to remember to be empathetic because we don't know what people are going through. People don't always
Yeah.
tell us what's happening. So tell us how we can be more self aware and also self accepting because that could really make us better leaders within our businesses.
Yeah. Well, when you become more self-aware or self-accepting, you're able to metabolize feedback very quickly because you don't get stuck in self-doubt. You don't get stuck in that imposter syndrome place, right? And so your decision-making quality improves as well. When we lack this awareness, we make decisions from a place where we're super unconscious about really what's impacting the decision. And that's going to impact our business as well.
How do you become more self aware? Because I feel like
Well,
that's kind of
yeah.
a big thing to unpack.
It is. So, there's many ways to become more self-aware, but there's a couple of practical ways that you can do it. And number one is to start paying attention to the data that your body is giving you from a feelings perspective, from an emotions perspective. When you're self-aware, you realize that the body gives you data, the mind gives you data, but oftentimes we just keep moving forward and we don't pay attention to kind of what's coming up for us. So where we're dragging, our energy is dragging, or we're feeling drained after a meeting, or we're feeling energized after a meeting, quite frankly. These pieces of information can make us more self-aware about what works for us and what doesn't work for us, and this allows us to be better leaders of ourselves, which are so important. So one is like listening to the body, and then two is surrounding yourself with the right mirrors. And what I mean by this are people that you trust to be candid and to not project their stuff onto you, right? Or if they do, you're self aware enough to realize that that's just what happened, right? But that you give these people permission to give you feedback and be a mirror for you. And this can be anywhere. Like one of my mirrors is my dog, quite frankly. He's a sensitive little guy. And if I'm moving too fast or, something's happening and I'm putting off all this anxious energy, he gives me feedback. But humans do this all the time for us. My son did it to me this morning as well. So he gave me some feedback and I had to stop and reflect and say, okay, I think actually you were right about that.
What do you think is a good, if we love this idea and we're like, okay, where do I find a mirror? Because my dog is the same way. So I think it's interesting that you're like, it could be your pet. But
Right.
if we're looking for a human mirror, how would we find that person? Are there certain traits that we would look for? What does that look like?
That's a really good question. So that might be a little bit different for each leader, and that's why self-knowledge is so important, right? But in general, the common through line would be somebody who is non-judgmental, right? And somebody who's able to see things through your perspective, right? Because most people only put it through their own filter, and somebody who is aware when they are projecting fear onto another person. Because oftentimes when we talk to somebody, we think they might be a mirror, but what they give back to us is some advice that is actually steeped in fear, right? And about they want to keep you safe. And right, this is how they give you this information. So somebody that's putting that on you is probably not the best mirror, but the way you like to hear the information can be very different to the human. Some people like it very direct. Like I like it very direct. Just tell me exactly what it is. It's going to be okay. Right. Other people would want it in a more kind of indirect way. So that's part of just knowing ourselves and how we want it. Once you get a good mirror, you know what that looks like because you feel accepted, you feel grounded, and you feel seen by that person.
Do you think that being self aware limits our personal growth as business owners, or do you think it's a different limit that might project us?
So, being self aware is not going to limit growth. What's going to limit growth is a lack of self awareness because when you are self aware, you don't get stuck, right? You don't get stuck when you realize that you're not good at something. You don't get stuck when you realize that you made a mistake. So the actual lack of self awareness is what limits business owners' growth because you can't metabolize that feedback quickly enough because you get stuck in that place.
How do you think personal growth improves our business growth?
It's I think how we do one thing is how we do anything, right? So if we're not personally growing, how can we be professionally growing? The person shows up to the workplace. The person leads the other humans. So I think I see it as just everything's intertwined. So if you're not growing personally, then you're definitely not growing professionally because you're not improving your ability to delegate, have better decision making skills, right? To understand, strategy, to know when to say no, to know when to ask for help. These are things that are not possible if you're not growing personally.
Well, and I really like how you brought up about being self aware can help not only ourselves, because like you mentioned earlier, like your interaction with your son this morning, but even with our employees, with our clients. I mean,
Mhm.
that could be huge, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, because the team can grow at the pace of the leader, right?
Mhm.
And if the leader is not evolving, then the team is going to get stuck at a certain level too. I once worked with an organization that was stuck at $30 million in sales, and the CEO wanted to get to $50 million. And I came in, I identified that the reason why they weren't able to get to where they wanted to go was because of the CEO. And so it was a really tough conversation. And it was just his inability to hold people to a standard. And so they were stuck at a certain level. And it was about his ability to actually hold himself to a standard. So that's how it's all intertwined.
Gosh, this stuff is so fascinating. I feel like I say this to so many people on my podcast, but for you, I feel like we could talk for hours about this because it's so fascinating realizing that we as leaders might be holding our teams back when we're like trying to motivate them and realize that it's us, not them, which I think is so amazing to be like, if we could change ourselves, like the sky's the limit, right?
Well, and that's actually the only thing we can change. I think the biggest fallacy of leaders is thinking that they can actually change the other people. We have no control over them. So we have control over ourselves, we have control over how we evolve. And then from there, we have a sphere of influence. And then we get to influence the right people that are going to positively impact our business.
Oh, that's like, there's so many things that you just said in that one line that I'm like, Oh my gosh. That's got to be eye opening for anyone listening to realize that as much as we want to change our people, we can't. We have to change
Yep.
ourselves, and then that will lead to other things. So I'm so glad that you said that. And that leads me into my next question because I
Sure.
love to ask this question of everybody that's on the podcast is that what's one piece of advice
Mhm.
that you would give to a small business owner? Because I know this topic is huge. There's so many different directions you could go with that.
Yeah. Well, of course, I would say get a coach yesterday, right? Choose one that's right for you. You need a good mirror. We're always working on something and trying to grow and evolve as leaders. So having the right coach is going to accelerate that development. And we all want to do things faster, right?
Of course.
So, and when we're leaders, at some point, because of positional power, people stop telling us the truth. It's just natural in humans. They want to keep themselves safe. And so you stop telling the boss things that might be hard to hear. And so having a coach allows you to have a really good neutral mirror to continue to give you the feedback that you need to grow.
I'm so glad that you said that because I think having that person, that coach to push you forward is it's so important in every different, not just in business, but overall as well. Now, you've got an activity that you made for us. So tell me a little bit more about that because I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. So, what we've created is an activity for your listeners that they can use to cultivate connection and empathy with anyone on their team, any loved one in their lives. And so, we'd like to, provide that to your listeners. And so, if they text connect, the word connect, CONNECT, to 602 560 8538, they'll get a copy of that, or they can send us an email at join@intentlyco.com and just put their first name in the subject line, and we'll email that over to them.
Perfect. And I'll be sure to list that in the show notes so that way people have got that phone number to make sure to text because I think this is something that all of us can improve on, right? I
Mm.
mean, we all need to become more self aware because that's just going to propel our businesses forward even more. So, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. I know you're super busy, but I'm so excited that you were here to share more with us. And again, for anybody listening, make sure you check the show notes to get that free activity because it could be the start of something incredible. So, is there anywhere else that people can follow you? Do you have Instagram? Where's a good place for people to reach out to you?
So we're heavily on LinkedIn, so at Intently, and then also intentlyco.com. And if they go there to our website, they'll also see everywhere else that we are on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate you
Thank
being
you.
here.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.